I'm going to stand up. I hope you can understand me. You can't? Okay, and I just want to let you know my accent is German. And I'm going to read something. I had already quite an exciting day, and I don't think I will be coherent in any other way. And I wrote when I wrote this piece for The World in a Jar, I sort of imagined a dialogue with Robert, so I'm actually going to address him personally. So, how to approach your work, The World in a Jar? The images are a reflection on the unspeakable violence of genocide, tragedy, atrocity, and war. Some of them are markers of axial events located in their own temporality. The Holocaust, Vietnam War, the US military invasion of Iraq, while others, General Custer, the burning of the Hindenburg Zeppelin, relate to another past. In the iconography, the images point to a temporal architecture of canonical representations. Eichmann at the Jerusalem trial, a sleeping John Paul II, the self-immolation of a Buddhist monk, the Ku Klux Klan, the suffering of Darfur, the first Palestinian Intifada. Art Spiegelman's images from Mosque first. The images are more than a time machine. They disclose a configuration Edmund Husserl once described as a thickened present, a present filled with the sediments of different moments and temporalities. With this, he referred to the comet's tail of retentions through which images manage to maintain their identity long after their inaugurating event has passed. World in a Jar is such a comet's tail. It performs an intervention in a historical state that cultural critique Andreas Huyssen has characterized as simultaneously being oversaturated with memory and amnesia. The images are in a jar. The act of enclosing them seems important here. Each image is securely stored away, albeit in an urn that turns a potentially fugitive product into a durable image. Their assumed interconnectedness is questioned by the act of isolating them. This is a small act of destruction for which you may have excellent motives. Perhaps you wish to keep the photos safe, or you want to be able to retrieve them whenever you can. Blurring the images is a further act of destruction. It is as if you literally destroy the visible form, stopping halfway, creating frayed, not clear-cut pictures. Once we consider the images within their popular circulation, a consumerist image culture, they appear so overly available and common that they become abstract by the very lack of attention paid to them. Instead of destroying the forms, then your act can be considered their careful restoration to visibility. The muted colors between gray and black diffuse the brilliance of a complete color palette. Lincoln's eyes, for example, show the graininess of the newspaper clip. Like so many of your chosen photos, this one is almost a monochrome. There is no longer a commitment to a bright future, the fantasy destiny of the future perfect. They remind me of Gerd Richter's images of deliberately obscured pictures, especially his cycle October 18, 1977. Here the reverse is true. Richter paints images from photos while you take pictures from paintings. Yet the commitment to understand the terrible things that happen is the same. One of the founding cultural critics, Theodor Adorno, warned us against the fetishism and narcissism of a cultural criticism that remains enclosed in its own domains. A criticism based in a culture somehow outside the rest of society. For me, an intervention, however disenchanted and problematic, remains welcome, and this forms one basis of my affinity with your work. There's a predictable way to consider these images as traumatic incapacitation or dreamlike blindness. Some of your images do have a dreamlike quality, and moreover, the act of fatiguing, by which I refer to your technique of cutting and flattening the image, is reminiscent of a violent transgression of the photograph's skin, potentially causing trauma, both physically and literally, I think. However, what interests me more here is their sensation. It is well known that still images can represent movement, and photography has its own devices to make that happen. It is that combination of the two meanings of moving, physical and emotional, that is activated by this work of yours. The image of Funky Kim Phuc, I can't locate this image right now here. One of the most famous images of the Vietnam War, taken by Nick Wood, is cinematic in that an action, running in that case, is stopped in its tracks, so that the photograph captures a single frame of an entire range. As almost always, you make one detail stand out, simply by excluding other photographic features. In this image, it is interestingly the 9-year-old girl, Kim Phuc herself, that is left out. The missing girl becomes a challenge. Her vanishing preempts the almost automatic commodification by a voracious image market. Memory needs to be worked for to be retrieved. And I'm a little bit under time stress, so I make a jump here, and I wanted to actually address another form of violence that I didn't think was immediately sort of obvious in your images, but that I thought of was interesting. So I make a tiger sleep here, so jump. And I'm moving now from genocidal and almost fanatic terror. I would like to make a jump to another kind of violence, namely the one that violates intimacy. I'm talking about the jar that contains an image of a woman that first reminded me of Marilyn Monroe, and I don't know who that woman is. At first, I was surprised to find that image here, but then I thought there's a serious question. To be honest, I almost found that image quite vulgar. What makes this image vulgar to me, not ugly, is the ostentatious display of cheek. The woman's passivity, lying on her bed, is nothing new in this kind of photo. The breast peeking out of her dress can be construed as drawing a voyeuristic gaze, but actually you also see a kind of intimacy in it. Women know that this happens when you lie down in a low-neck dress. I was thinking here of Carrie Mae Weems' work, I don't know if you know her, Mirror, Mirror from the Ain't Joking series from 1987 to 1988. In this work, Carrie Mae Weems takes Snow White as her point of focus, and the artist knows how to put many layers in language as well as in image. It is one of my favorite photographic artworks, a masterpiece of cultural critique and an incredibly savvy way of using racism against itself, by way of the myths and fairy tales that sustain it. In Mirror, Mirror, the woman looking in the mirror is wearing a satin shift. One of the shoulder strips has a twist in it. When I first saw that image, that so moved me as if I was a girl looking into the mirror and seeing not her own face, but one construed by a hostile culture, pure rejection, a different kind of vampirism and violence, you could say. What does historical mean to you in your art? In a recording on the DVD you were kind enough to send me, you said that the installation pays homage in a postmodern fashion to the importance of history. World in a Jar is a history that relays an almost endless war of terror. This is war marked not only as one of familiar military invasion, for example, the current invasions in Iraq, or you just think of the images of Abu Ghraib, but also as a perennial present. The narrative is open. There is no urgent appeal to a new time, a democracy, a future. In fact, we could easily read as qualifying the future as an infinite war. And yet, I cannot quite believe that you want to advance culturally pessimistic articulations. Yours may be an anti-redemptory enunciation, but it is still set in a memory enterprise that records the past to create a more dignified present. That's how I read the word. Thank you.